Good morning. Today is February 20th, 2015. My name is Mrs. Meyer, and this presentation will show what it will be like for students learning in a virtual classroom or viewing the playback link at a more convenient time. Life, Cells, and Transports. This science unit is for 6th and 7th grade students and is broken down to two mini lessons focusing on 4 criteria that constitutes what life is, how cells are organized and what their functions are, transport systems, active, passive, diffusion, and osmosis. For my performance-based project, I have chosen Madeline Hunter's Instructional Theory into Practice. I will integrate the following strategies: identifying similarities and differences, note-taking and summarizing, teaching specific types of knowledge, multiple key details, reinforcing effort and providing recognition. By the end of this lesson, the student will be able to identify the 4 criteria for life, label the cell, defining its functions, compare and contrast an animal cell and a plant cell, differentiate between active and passive transport, and describe endocytosis and exocytosis. Before I introduce the lesson, I will have students recall prior knowledge about what it means to be alive by posing the question, what is life? I would wait for some responses, providing positive feedback, and pose another question. If I were to ask you if a rock is alive, the student would probably rather answer quickly, no. On the other hand, if I asked whether or not a blade of grass was alive, the student would answer, yes. Most likely, we can distinguish between living and non-living by just giving examples of what is alive and what is not. On our screen, we see living and non-living items. But scientists need to be a little bit more detailed in describing what it means to be alive. Students are given a graphic organizer to list the characteristics of living things: DNA, sense change, respond to change, extract energy, sustain themselves, reproduce. Our learning objective is to establish the 4 common criteria which scientists have established, determining if something is considered to be alive or not. We have examples to evaluate. We have a windmill. A windmill does not have DNA. A windmill does not have a method for extracting the energy. It cannot sense change, and it cannot reproduce. In comparison to a rooster, which has DNA, it has a method for extracting energy, it can sense change, and it can reproduce. This understanding leads us to investigate the smallest unit of life, the cell, because life is cellular. The cell, which is naked to the human eye, yet has more power than a jumbo jet. But how do we see cells? We are aided by the use of microscopes. Scientists have unearthed a powerful universe that exists inside our bodies, which at one time was invisible to the eye. Microscopes are powerful instruments that scientists use to view cells and other materials. Cells are highly specialized and organized. Using a graphic images, students are shown a Venn diagram comparing the 2 cells. We see what's common between the two, between an animal cell and a plant cell. They share a cell membrane, ribosomes, nucleus, an endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, vacuoles, mitochondria, lysosomes. What they don't share is a plant cell has a cell wall and chloroplasts. To better comprehend this abstract concept, let's use the analogy of how a city's organization is structured, and we will compare that organization and structure to that of a cell. In a city, there are many jobs to be done. So too are there in the cell. The cell has 2 main components, the nucleus and the cytoplasm. The nucleus is the core of the cell, or the center of our city government. It is the control center of the cell. The nucleus contains all the cell's DNA, the coded information for making proteins and other important molecules to make more cells. The other component is the cytoplasm. It is a portion of the cell outside the nucleus which contains specialized organs called organelles, which literally means little organs. Understanding what each organelle does helps us to understand the cell as a whole. Students will take notes on these definitions for future references. We also have a cell membrane, which is a gatekeeper which controls what enters and leaves. The mitochondria, which is the electric company of the cell, gives its cell its might and power. The lysosomes are like the policemen. They protect the cells by destroying invaders like bacteria. They also break down complex chemicals for the cell membrane to take inside the cell. The Golgi bodies are like a grocery store that delivers proteins and fats that the cell makes and delivers them anywhere in the cell that it is needed. The endoplasmic reticulum. This is the transportation system of the city. The ER transports things around, assisting the Golgi bodies, but they are also the garbage men of the city. The ER sends waste to where it needs to go so that it can leave the cell. The ER can be either the mail person or the garbage person, depending on the need. The centrioles are special organelles that help cells reproduce. They are like the mothers of the city because they help the cell make more of itself. Here's a picture of the cell. We can see all the different ribosomes, the lysosomes, the mitochondria, the nucleus, and the plasma membrane. Here's a cross-section of a plant cell. Here we see the cell wall, we see the chloroplasts, we see ribosomes, Golgi apparatus, and the nucleus. Cells are vital to our living, and there have been major positive changes in our health care from the study of cells. Many cures for diseases have been found as a result of the cell study. Let's recap. There are 4 criteria for life: contain DNA, extract energy and convert it to sustain themselves, sense changes and responds, and reproduces. Cells are vital to our living. They have certain parts: the nucleus, mitochondria, cytoplasm, cell membrane, and vacuoles. In comparison to a plant cell, the plant cell has a cell wall and chloroplasts. Students are given an advanced organizer to elicit prior knowledge about transport systems. How do we get energy? How do the cells get energy? How does the cell move things in and out of itself? The cell utilizes transport systems similar to how a country utilizes its borders. They are highly selective to what comes in and out of their borders. Cell membranes are the gatekeepers of the cell. As we can see here in our graphic organizer, there are various transport systems. Passive transport is the movement of materials across the cell membrane without using cellular energy. It accomplishes this by another process called diffusion. Diffusion is the movement of molecules of a substance moving from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. Facilitated diffusion helps those molecules pass through special protein channels. Osmosis is an example of facilitated diffusion. An analogy that we can use is when a drawbridge raises to let a boat in and then lowers the bridge, allowing access to the channel. In comparison to active transport, it is the movement of materials against a concentration difference and requires energy. There are a few types of active transport. Endocytosis, which is a process whereby taking materials into the cell by means of enfolding or pockets of the cell membrane. Exocytosis is a process by which the cell releases the material out of the cell. Students are given a graphic organizer to restate the transport processes and provide examples. Students are then directed to 2 links providing videos reinforcing and providing visual cues of the transport systems. Students are then given another link for a quiz for an assessment of this unit. We hope you've enjoyed our lesson on life, cells, and transport. Thank you.